The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, casting long streaks of golden light across the joint military base. The air smelled faintly of gun oil, ozone from discharged rounds, and the earthy tang of early morning dew. Commander Daniel Mercer, a decorated Navy SEAL with more than 2 decades of combat experience, strode purposefully toward the weapons maintenance bay. His boots clicked against the concrete floor, echoing through the near-empty hangar, a familiar sound that always seemed to focus his mind. Today's mission wasn't an operation. It was oversight, routine inspection of weapons and equipment across units. But even routine days had a way of surprising him. As he approached the massive sliding doors of the maintenance bay, he noticed something, or rather someone, that made him pause. A lone figure hunched over a table in the center of the room, hands moving deftly across the massive frame of a Barrett M1 7.50 caliber sniper rifle. At first glance, she seemed like any other weapons technician, quiet, methodical, absorbed in her task. But something about the way she handled the gun drew his attention, made him slow his pace. She worked with the rifle as if it were an extension of her own body. Every movement was precise, each disassembly, each inspection, each carefully oiled component executed with flawless rhythm. Her hands were steady, unfaltering, betraying no sign of nervousness, despite the massive weight of the weapon. Most trainees or even seasoned soldiers approached the Barrett with a mix of respect and caution, conscious of its size and power. But she handled it with an intimacy that suggested familiarity born from thousands of hours of practice. Mercer's curiosity sharpened. He stepped closer, letting his gaze take in more details. Her uniform was standard, yet immaculate. No insignia screamed elite unit affiliation. No flashy patches broadcasted accolades or honors. Even her hair, pulled back tightly into a functional bun, was unremarkable. And yet, there was something commanding in her posture, something in the calm precision of her work that spoke of experience beyond what mere paperwork could reveal. "Good morning," he said, his voice breaking the rhythm of her quiet concentration. She glanced up, eyes cool and steady, revealing nothing but professionalism. "Morning, sir," she replied. Her voice was calm, neutral, carrying no hint of self-importance, no edge of arrogance. She returned immediately to her task, leaving Mercer to study her more closely. He took note of her hands, strong yet agile, with fingers that seemed sculpted for meticulous work. There was a certain ease in how she aligned the barrel, checked the sights, and cleaned the intricate mechanics inside. Mercer had seen countless weapons masters in his career, but few exhibited this kind of fluid confidence. Most weapons technicians, even experienced ones, carried some tension when handling a gun of this magnitude. She had none. Nearby, a couple of Marines passed through the bay. They gave a subtle nod, a glance of acknowledgement toward her, and Mercer caught the faint whisper of their conversation. "Yeah, that's her, the sniper," one muttered, voice barely audible. The commander's ears perked up, but before he could catch more, they moved on. Sniper. That was a term often thrown loosely, but in military circles it carried weight. A sniper was precision, patience, and lethality in one focused package. Could she truly be what they whispered? He crouched slightly to examine the rifle more closely, pretending to inspect a nearby workbench. He noticed the care with which she cleaned each component. Her movements weren't rushed. There was no performative flair. Every part was methodically stripped, cleaned, lubricated, and reassembled. Her routine, though quiet and almost meditative, spoke volumes. She had the discipline of someone who had spent years in training and missions where every detail mattered, where even the smallest oversight could be fatal. "Impressive technique," Mercer said, letting his words hang in the air, a test more than a compliment. She glanced up again, nodding slightly. "Thank you, sir, just following procedure." Her tone was matter-of-fact, humble, offering no flourish, no embellishment. Mercer found himself observing her more than the rifle now. Her gaze was steady, analytical, the kind of calm that came from someone who had faced danger head-on and survived. There was a quiet intensity to her, a controlled energy that spoke of both patience and lethal skill. Most soldiers projected their competence outward through confidence, sometimes even arrogance. She projected hers inward, through action and focus. He straightened, considering whether to push further. Most would reveal their rank, their accolades, or their achievements immediately, but she offered nothing. It was almost as if she were invisible to recognition, yet her competence demanded attention. Mercer's instincts, honed over decades of combat, told him that this woman was not just a technician. She was something far more significant. A distant clang from the armory shook the quiet, and Mercer's gaze drifted back to her hands on the Barrett. He noticed how her fingers moved over the trigger mechanism with intimate knowledge, adjusting delicate parts without hesitation. She worked silently, the only sounds being the soft clink of metal and the faint hiss of compressed air from a nearby cleaning station. It was hypnotic, almost ceremonial, the way she respected the weapon while commanding it. He decided to break the silence once more. "How long have you been handling these rifles?" he asked casually, though he already suspected the answer. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second, steady and unflinching. "Long enough to know what they can do," she replied, her voice low, neutral, but edged with confidence. "And long enough to know when not to trust them completely." Mercer nodded slightly, intrigued. He had met hundreds of operators, weapons specialists, and snipers in his career. Few were as understated yet commanding. Most demanded recognition, their reputations preceding them. She carried nothing outwardly, no accolades, no stories, but her presence spoke louder than any medal. As he watched her finish reassembling the Barrett, he realized she moved with a rhythm, a choreography that could only come from countless repetitions, countless hours of training and real combat experience. It wasn't performance. It was muscle memory married to instinct. Mercer felt a rare sense of respect, a mixture of curiosity and admiration that prickled along his spine. He had seen extraordinary soldiers, yes, but few who carried such lethal quietness. And then he noticed something else, how her gaze occasionally flicked toward the target range outside the bay, as if measuring distance, wind, and trajectory in her mind even now. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't casual observation. It was calculation, precision, readiness. Mercer's pulse quickened slightly. He had seen this look before in operators who could alter the course of a mission in a single moment. She noticed his gaze but said nothing. She simply continued cleaning, methodically, deliberately, and with unwavering focus. Mercer realized something profound. Appearances could be deceiving. Here stood someone who could possibly redefine his understanding of skill and precision in the field, yet she wore her talent lightly, like a cloak of invisibility. The SEAL commander, who had witnessed countless acts of courage and genius, found himself momentarily humbled. He knew one thing with certainty. Today, he had encountered a soldier unlike any he had met before. One whose reputation, hidden behind humility and silence, promised to be extraordinary, though he had no idea just how extraordinary. And as he stepped back, letting her finish her work uninterrupted, he felt the stirring of a story yet to be told. A story that began here, in this quiet weapons bay, with a woman, a Barrett.50, and a calm that hid a storm of precision waiting to be unleashed. The afternoon sun had climbed higher, spilling harsh light across the base, glinting off metal surfaces and the occasional ripple of camouflage netting. Commander Daniel Mercer lingered near the entrance of the weapons bay, unable to shake the image of the woman he had just watched. She moved with an almost supernatural calm, a precision that was rarely seen even among the most elite marksmen he had trained alongside. Her hands continued to glide over the Barrett.50 caliber, cleaning, lubricating, reassembling, every motion controlled, deliberate, and practiced. It was a rhythm, a silent language of someone intimately familiar with one of the most powerful rifles in the U.S. arsenal. Mercer finally made the decision to approach her again. He didn't want to startle her, nor did he wish to interrupt her work, but his curiosity was too great. He stepped closer, boots echoing softly against the concrete floor. "You make that rifle look easy," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. She didn't look up immediately. Her hands moved with meticulous care, rotating the bolt and inspecting the barrel's chamber. Only after a moment did her eyes meet his, cool and steady, a slight narrowing that suggested assessment rather than surprise. "It's not about ease, sir," she said. "It's about respect. Know the rifle, respect the rifle, and it will respect you in return." Mercer raised an eyebrow. The line sounded almost philosophical, yet he knew better. This wasn't some rehearsed quip. She spoke from experience, hard-earned, tested in ways most could not imagine. A skilled operator trained under fire measured each word as carefully as each shot. "I take it you've spent a lot of time with this weapon," he said. "Enough to know when it can do everything and when it can fail," she replied. Her voice was steady, neutral, lacking any hint of ego. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't performing. She was stating a fact as naturally as breathing. Mercer studied her more closely now, noticing subtleties he hadn't before. Her uniform, though standard, was impeccably maintained. Her posture was firm yet relaxed, every muscle ready for action but not tense. Her hands were strong but nimble, capable of both delicate maintenance and the brute force required to control the massive rifle. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, the kind that came only from countless hours of repetition under pressure. He allowed himself a small smile. He had seen many soldiers try to impress their superiors with flashy displays or empty talk. She didn't need any of that. Every movement, every glance, every action spoke louder than words ever could. Mercer's attention was drawn to a faint glimmer in her eyes as she glanced toward the shooting range outside the bay. It wasn't casual observation. She was calculating distance, wind, and trajectory in a split second, mentally overlaying data only an expert could process. It was a predator's gaze, calm yet laser-focused, assessing the environment for opportunities and threats. Mercer felt a rare mix of awe and unease. He had met many operators who could kill at extraordinary distances, but few carried the calm precision he was witnessing. Nearby, 2 Marines entered the bay carrying a crate of ammunition. Their eyes immediately fell on her, and for the first time Mercer caught the faint exchange of recognition. "Yeah, that's her," one whispered to the other, barely audible but enough for Mercer to hear. "The one with the record shot. The sniper." The words hung in the air like a spark threatening to ignite a wildfire. Mercer froze, letting their whisper sink in. A record shot. He had dealt with snipers who had earned medals and citations, but a record, especially with the Barrett.50, was rare. Only a handful in the world could hit targets at extraordinary distances, and even fewer in active deployment. Could she really be the operator they murmured about? He forced himself to focus, pushing aside the growing sense of disbelief. Maybe it was rumor, exaggeration, or just gossip running through the ranks. Still, his instincts told him there was more truth here than there should be. Deciding not to interrupt the others, he backed away slightly, allowing her to continue. The way she moved, the subtle adjustments of her grip, the careful oiling of the bolt, the measured checks of the barrel, was almost hypnotic. He noted how she seemed to communicate silently with the weapon, as if the rifle itself were a trusted partner rather than a tool. It was a relationship built on trust, skill, and countless hours of shared purpose. Mercer's curiosity deepened. He wanted to know more, to understand the extent of her skill, but the woman didn't offer anything voluntarily. No hints, no stories, no gestures that suggested she had achieved fame or infamy on the battlefield. She simply worked methodically, without seeking attention. Finally, Mercer approached a crate of spare parts nearby and pretended to inspect it, all the while observing her. "Do you instruct others on this rifle?" he asked casually, testing the waters. She paused, considering his question, then shook her head. "Occasionally, only when requested. Most people aren't ready for what it demands." Mercer felt a shiver of respect. Not just technical skill, but judgment, humility, and understanding of responsibility. Here was someone who wielded extreme power with extreme caution. Most shooters of her caliber, especially those who held records or accolades, would have no issue showcasing their abilities. She did not. The afternoon stretched on, the bay filled with quiet sounds. The faint clink of metal, the soft hiss of compressed air, the distant hum of vehicles outside. Mercer observed her tirelessly, noting every detail, trying to discern how much of what he was seeing was innate talent versus rigorous training. It was impossible to separate the two. Her confidence was too natural, too complete to be faked. He recalled the whispers he had overheard from the Marines and the flicker of calculation in her eyes. There was a story here, a past filled with missions, victories, and perhaps dangers only a select few could understand. Mercer's mind raced with possibilities. Was she a sniper on record-breaking missions? Had she been involved in operations too secret for even him to know? Every instinct he had honed over 20 years screamed at him that she was extraordinary, and yet she moved through the world almost invisibly. The commander realized that this encounter would stay with him. He had met many remarkable soldiers in his life, heroes, sharpshooters, strategists, but rarely had he encountered someone whose skill and composure were so effortlessly understated. She carried immense ability quietly, without need for recognition or validation, yet her presence was impossible to ignore. As the sun began to shift toward the horizon, Mercer finally spoke again. "You carry yourself with unusual precision," he said, choosing his words carefully. She glanced at him, eyes calm, unreadable. "Precision isn't unusual, it's necessary," she said simply. Her answer carried no arrogance, yet it was undeniable in its weight. Mercer stepped back, finally letting her continue her work in peace. He had no doubt that she was someone who could redefine any mission she participated in, any scenario she entered. And yet, she remained humble, quiet, almost invisible in her presence. As he walked out of the weapons bay, his mind buzzed with curiosity, questions, and anticipation. Today, he had encountered a soldier unlike any he had met before, a professional whose record, skill, and experience were hidden beneath a veneer of calm routine. He didn't yet know the full story of her achievements, but he knew one thing: she would not remain just a technician quietly maintaining rifles for long. Mercer's instincts whispered that her real story, the one that involved feats so incredible they almost seemed impossible, was just beginning to reveal itself. And he, by chance, had stumbled upon the first chapter. By mid-afternoon, the base seemed to pulse with activity, but for Commander Daniel Mercer, the world had narrowed to a single thought: the woman in the weapons bay. Every time he replayed her movements in his mind, the calm precision, the fluid familiarity with the Barrett.50, the almost imperceptible calculation in her gaze, he couldn't shake the whispers he had overheard earlier. A sniper, a record shot, an operator who had done what most considered impossible. Mercer had spent his career surrounded by extraordinary soldiers. He had trained, fought, and survived with some of the best in the world. But there were few experiences that truly left him questioning what he thought was possible. This was one of them. He needed answers. Later that evening, Mercer made his way through the quieter corridors of the base, moving past sleeping quarters and briefing rooms toward the rec room where soldiers often unwound. As he approached, he caught snippets of conversations, hushed and hurried. His curiosity sharpened. "I'm telling you, she's not just any sniper," one Marine whispered. "You don't just hit a target at 3,247 meters by accident. That shot, that was perfect." Another voice chimed in, barely audible over the clatter of cups and the hum of the heater. "It wasn't just distance. The wind, elevation, moving target, she did it all. First round. No adjustment, no margin for error." Mercer paused at the doorway, leaning against the frame, letting the words settle. 3,247 meters. That was nearly 2 miles. A distance most shooters in the world could not manage, not with certainty, not under operational conditions. Only a select few had ever been trained or trusted to attempt something remotely approaching that range. and if these whispers were true, she had done it in a real mission scenario. The soldiers' conversation drifted closer to operational details. It was a mountain ridge, enemy spotter, our team pinned down below. One shot, another voice caught a breathless note of awe, and she saved everyone. Mercer's pulse quickened. He had dealt with missions that required split-second decisions, but this story, if accurate, was something extraordinary. He could feel the weight of it, the implication that this woman was not just skilled, but a force multiplier on the battlefield, capable of influencing outcomes with a single precise shot. He stepped back quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Let the soldiers speak freely. He listened as they speculated about her identity, her experience, and the audacity of a mission that few even knew existed. Most of what they said was fragmentary, whispered with respect and awe, classified operations, long-range sniper engagements, the impossible becoming possible through her skill. Mercer found himself reconstructing the scene in his mind, the sheer courage and precision required. It was almost unimaginable. That night back in his quarters, Mercer could not sleep. He replayed every detail he had observed, the steady hands, the measured rhythm of cleaning the Barrett, the faint flicker of calculation when her gaze met the horizon. He ran the whispers through his mind. Could the rumors be true? Could someone so understated, so calm and quiet, truly hold the world's longest sniper shot record? Every instinct screamed yes, but his training demanded skepticism. He pulled out a tactical notebook, the one he used to document anomalies and important observations. Mercer began jotting down what he knew. First, the technique observed in the weapons bay. Second, the whispers of a 3,247-meter shot. Third, the subtle cues of someone far beyond routine training. Then came the question, who was she, really? He had seen many soldiers hide their achievements, but the combination of humility and sheer capability was almost unheard of. The next morning, Mercer returned to the weapons bay under the pretense of checking standard-issue rifles. The woman was already there, standing over the Barrett as if she had never left. He noticed her methodical approach to inspecting every component, the way she aligned the barrel with the cleaning rod, the way she lubricated moving parts, the gentle but precise torque applied to the bolt assembly. Her movements told him more than her file ever could. He finally asked casually, "You've handled this rifle a long time, haven't you?" Her gaze met his, cool, deliberate. "Long enough to know its strengths, long enough to respect its limits," she said. Her voice carried an edge of quiet authority that Mercer had rarely heard outside of active combat situations. He nodded slowly, observing the subtle way she shifted her weight, the tiny adjustments she made that ensured she would never misalign the rifle. Even in maintenance, she was calculating distance, balance, environmental factors. Her mind always seemed one step ahead, even in a task as routine as cleaning. Over the next few days, Mercer made subtle inquiries. He asked around among the Marines and operators who had crossed paths with her. No one gave him a straight answer. Most were sworn to secrecy. Some whispered with awe, others shook their heads and muttered something about missions that could not be spoken of. Each fragment he gathered reinforced the impossible picture. This woman had accomplished feats that very few in the world could achieve. And yet, despite the whispers, she carried herself with extraordinary humility. Unlike many soldiers who wore their accomplishments as badges, she treated her skill as invisible. She did not demand attention, nor did she brag about feats that were known only to a select few. Mercer found himself admiring not only her talent, but the discipline and restraint it took to carry such power quietly. He began to understand the rare balance she possessed. Lethal precision coupled with humility, experience without arrogance, skill without showmanship. The more he learned, the more intrigued he became. This was not a soldier to be underestimated, nor was she a technician to be ignored. She was a hidden force, moving unnoticed among ranks yet capable of extraordinary impact. That afternoon, Mercer watched her again, this time more deliberately. She adjusted the Barrett with a small torque wrench, inspected the barrel for microscopic imperfections, and aligned the scope with careful, almost meditative focus. Every movement radiated mastery. He could almost imagine her on a ridge, miles away from any support, calculating wind, distance, and target movement with a precision that defied human limits. Mercer's thoughts returned to the whispers of 3,247 meters, the longest sniper shot record ever confirmed. If the rumors were true, this was the woman capable of that impossible feat. He realized he had been underestimating her because she did not announce her achievements. She did not wear medals or patches that marked her extraordinary skill. She simply worked, and in doing so, she revealed her greatness to those perceptive enough to see it. For the first time in years, Mercer felt a rare sense of anticipation. He wanted to witness her in action, to see the reality behind the whispers, to understand the depth of her capability. And he knew that, in her quiet confidence and understated power, he had stumbled upon someone whose story would not be forgotten once it emerged from the shadows. As evening fell over the base, Mercer left the bay, his mind alive with questions. Who was she? Where had she served? How many lives had she influenced with the barrel of that massive rifle? And most importantly, would he ever see the shot that had etched her name in the whispered legends of the ranks? He walked back through the fatting light, the sound of his boots against the concrete echoing like a heartbeat. The base was full of life, yet for him, the world had narrowed to one quiet soldier, one powerful rifle, and the mysteries that lay hidden behind her calm eyes. One thing was certain. This was only the beginning of the story, and it was a story that he could not afford to ignore. By the time he returned to his quarters, Mercer had resolved to learn more. The whispers were not just gossip. They were fragments of truth, glimpses of a remarkable achievement and an extraordinary operator. And he, by circumstance and curiosity, had been given a first look into a world few were allowed to witness. The woman in the weapons bay had captured his attention, and he knew she would not let it go easily. Her story, her record, and her unmatched skill were all waiting to be revealed, and he was determined to uncover it. One careful observation, one whispered rumor, and one calculated interaction at a time. The following morning, Commander Daniel Mercer found himself walking through the sterile corridors of the base toward the administrative offices. Even with decades of military experience, the weight of curiosity pressed upon him like a physical force. Every step was measured, deliberate, as if he were approaching a revelation that might change everything he thought he knew about this mysterious sniper. The previous days had been filled with observation, whispers, and fragmentary stories, but today he was determined to look beyond rumor. Today he wanted facts. The office doors loomed ahead, gray and unassuming, belying the secrets they held. Mercer flashed his credentials at the clerk, offering a terse explanation for his request. "I need to review Specialist Morgan's personnel and operational file," he said, using the name he had been able to confirm from the uniform. The clerk's eyes widened ever so slightly, then shifted toward a small, reinforced cabinet in the corner. A heavy sigh passed over the room as Mercer was escorted toward it. What was pulled from the cabinet made him pause. The folder was thick, yet many of its pages were blacked out with bold, classified Tier 1 OPERATONS stamps. Only fragments were visible, lines of text buried in a sea of redaction. Mercer ran a gloved hand over the cover. He had accessed countless sensitive files in his career, but something about this one felt different. It hummed with the weight of hidden achievement, of missions executed in shadows, of skill measured in extremes few could imagine. He settled into a chair, careful not to disturb the order of the pages, and began reading what little was unredacted. The file confirmed deployments across multiple regions, including areas rarely acknowledged in official reports. There were mentions of joint task forces, operations with high-risk objectives, and several references to engagements beyond standard sniper range. One fragment stood out, underlined in ink. Ballistic engagement exceeding 3,200 meters confirmed, conditions, extreme elevation, variable wind, hostile target. Mercer leaned back, absorbing the implications. over 3,200 meters. The whispers he had overheard were more than rumor, they were fact. She had performed a sniper shot that nearly matched the limits of human capability, under conditions that would challenge even the most seasoned marksman. A single bullet, perfectly calculated across more than 3 kilometers of terrain. The thought alone made his chest tighten with both admiration and disbelief. As he continued through the file, Mercer noted the pattern of redaction: mission details, operational outcomes, team compositions, even location coordinates. Only the consequences and skill metrics were left visible. Specialist Morgan's achievements were carefully shielded from public and even military acknowledgement. This wasn't merely secrecy. It was deliberate concealment. Only a select few were allowed to know the full extent of her skill, and even they were bound by strict non-disclosure agreements. Mercer's mind wandered back to the weapons bay, the way she had handled the Barrett, the calm precision, the absence of ego. Now he understood why. She had faced situations most soldiers could not imagine, had executed feats so extraordinary that recognition would draw attention she did not want, and perhaps could not legally receive. Her humility was not just personal, it was operational. A few more unredacted pages offered glimpses into her training regimen, though even these were heavily coded. Notes on extended range calculations, specialized wind analysis, and altitude compensation indicated a level of expertise few in the world could claim. Mercer had trained with long-range snipers before, but the level of detail and execution hinted at a mastery bordering on the extraordinary. Every operation, every calculation, every method had been honed to an almost surgical perfection. One small photograph slipped from the folder as he turned the page. Mercer caught it instinctively. It showed a distant ridge, barely visible through grainy terrain, a tiny figure barely distinguishable on a mountaintop. He recognized the angle of the photograph: extreme elevation, miles of clear line of sight. It was the kind of shot that most snipers wouldn't dare attempt even in controlled conditions. The image left him breathless. Somewhere out there she had stood, calculated, and fired. One bullet. One opportunity, and she had succeeded. Mercer paused, rubbing his forehead. The reality was sinking in. This was not just skill or luck. This was a calculated genius executed under pressure, under observation, and under circumstances that would break lesser soldiers. The whispers from the base, the fragments he had overheard, now made sense. She had done the impossible, and she carried it lightly, without ceremony or public recognition. A note at the bottom of the page caught his eye. Engagement recorded as longest confirmed sniper shot in operational history. Mercer exhaled slowly, the words almost too incredible to believe. He had trained with elite snipers who had made remarkable shots, but the scale of this achievement was unprecedented. The woman he had dismissed as a quiet technician, a soldier simply maintaining a rifle, was in fact a legend. A true operative, whose skill had been measured at the very edge of human capability. He continued reading, tracing the subtle hints of missions and operations. There were mentions of hostile environments, complex coordination with support teams, and the occasional reference to critical intervention. Each fragment pointed to one truth: she had saved lives, likely more than he could quantify, and she had done so with precision, calm, and an absence of public acknowledgement. Mercer's respect for her deepened. He had seen many operators carry medals, ribbons, and accolades as proof of their skill. Specialist Morgan carried nothing of the sort. Instead, she carried a quiet confidence, discipline, and humility that masked the extraordinary feats hidden in the shadows of her record. He realized that for her, recognition was irrelevant. Success was measured in outcomes, in precision, and in lives preserved, not applause. He closed the folder carefully, still absorbing what he had learned. The hum of the base outside felt distant. For the first time in years, Mercer felt like an observer, almost a student, witnessing a level of expertise he had rarely encountered. Specialist Morgan was not merely a soldier or a sniper. She was a quiet force, a hidden legend moving unnoticed through the ranks, capable of shaping outcomes that few even knew existed. As he rose from his chair, Mercer made a mental note. He would have to approach her differently from now on. No casual comments, no assumptions. Every interaction would require tact, respect, and discretion. He was dealing with someone whose achievements were on a scale that could not be measured by standard metrics. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that her world record shot, her legendary status, was just one facet of a career filled with moments that would remain classified, secret, and extraordinary. That evening, as he walked back toward the weapons bay, Mercer's mind raced. He had seen legends before, but this woman's combination of skill, humility, and operational success was unmatched. She had been whispered about, discussed in fragments and rumors, but he now had concrete evidence. She had performed a sniper shot across more than 3 kilometers in operational conditions that few could even imagine. And she had done so not for recognition, not for medals, but because it was necessary, because it saved lives. When he re-entered the bay, she was there again, quietly performing maintenance on the Barrett.50. The hum of the air compressors, the faint clinking of metal, and her measured breathing created a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. Mercer watched silently, the knowledge of her file deepening his respect. He understood now why she moved with such calm focus. Her hands, her eyes, her posture, they all reflected experience measured in extremes, not in accolades. For Mercer, the encounter had changed everything. He had walked in thinking he was observing a technician, someone performing routine maintenance. He left with the knowledge that he had glimpsed a legend in action, a soldier whose skill and discipline had quietly rewritten the limits of sniper operations. The file had not revealed everything, but it had revealed enough. Specialist Morgan was extraordinary, operating in a realm few could comprehend, and doing so with humility that bordered on self-effacement. That night, as Mercer lay in his quarters, he replayed everything he had learned. The whispers, the file, the photograph, the fragments of operational notes, they all painted a picture of a soldier operating on the edge of possibility, carrying out feats that defied belief, yet doing so silently, modestly, and without fanfare. He realized he had stumbled upon someone who would change his perception of what a sniper, what a soldier could achieve. And he knew, with certainty, that her story, the full story, was only beginning to emerge. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and dew as the base prepared for the long-range shooting demonstration. Today's event had been scheduled to showcase marksmanship to visiting commanders, a routine display of skill meant to impress. But it was also a rare opportunity for Mercer to see Specialist Morgan in action under controlled yet high-pressure conditions. He arrived early, moving through the quiet corridors toward the firing range, anticipation coiling in his chest. The range itself was vast, stretching across rolling hills and sparse vegetation, a perfect setting for testing the limits of sniper rifles. Targets were positioned at varying distances, with the furthest a staggering 2,500 meters, slightly short of her rumored record. As Mercer approached the firing line, he noticed the quiet tension among the operators and instructors. Even the most seasoned shooters were whispering in subdued tones, casting glances toward the lone woman who was already preparing her equipment. Specialist Morgan was calm, methodical, and deliberate. She unpacked her Barrett.50, each movement smooth, almost ritualistic. She checked her scope, adjusted the bipod, and methodically calculated wind, humidity, and elevation. Yet she did so silently, without speaking or gesturing, her presence commanding attention simply through poise and precision. Every eye on the range instinctively gravitated toward her, though she did not acknowledge them. Mercer found himself stepping back, letting her space remain undisturbed. He had watched her handle the rifle in the weapons bay, but there was a different energy here. This was live fire, distance that challenged physics itself, and the pressure of a demonstration where failure, even in theory, could be scrutinized. And yet she moved with confidence, the same calm focus that had drawn his attention days earlier. When the instructor called for the first shooter to fire, she waited, observing the wind flags and taking notes in her mind. A few operators fired, demonstrating proficiency, hitting mid-range targets with skill. The crowd murmured, impressed but largely within expectations. Then it was her turn. She stepped forward, adjusting the Barrett with a deliberate care that drew every eye. Mercer noted the subtle shifts in her stance, the way her breathing became a rhythm, in sync with her body's minute adjustments. She lowered her eye to the scope, and in that instant the base seemed to go silent. It was as if the world had narrowed to the distance between her and the target. The commander watched, holding his breath almost unconsciously. She calculated the wind, slope, and range with a fluidity that made it seem effortless. Yet Mercer knew better. This was the work of someone who had studied, trained, and fought at the absolute limits of sniper capability. Her first round went downrange, and the target, at a distance most considered impossible for precision engagement under even the best conditions, exploded in impact. Gasps echoed across the firing line. Operators who had whispered doubts stared in disbelief. Instructors exchanged looks of stunned recognition. Mercer felt his chest tighten. He had seen expert shooters, even record-holding snipers, take multiple adjustments for extreme-range shots. She had done it with one calculated, perfect shot. She didn't celebrate. She didn't move with dramatics. She simply checked her equipment, adjusted her stance, and prepared for a follow-up round. The crowd's awe grew quietly. They were witnessing mastery not as spectacle but as fact. Mercer's respect deepened further. This was not luck. This was controlled, deliberate, and precise skill honed to an extraordinary level. The demonstration continued. Targets varied in distance, some moving, others obscured by natural terrain. Each shot she fired found its mark with an almost supernatural consistency. Operators whispered about impossible calculations, about wind corrections and bullet drop over distances that defied most assumptions. Mercer realized that every movement she had made in the weapon's bay, every subtle adjustment, every meticulous action had been preparation for moments like this. Her competence was absolute, complete, and undeniable. As the session progressed, Mercer finally approached her, letting the other operators continue without noticing. "Your reputation precedes you," he said quietly, "but I didn't expect this." She looked up, calm and composed. "I don't work for reputation," she said. "I work to make sure the shot counts, that's all." Her voice carried quiet authority but not arrogance. Mercer felt the truth in it. This was someone whose skill was measured by results, not accolades. He stepped back to observe as she fired the final extreme-range shot, beyond what most would even attempt. The bullet sailed across the distance with near-perfect trajectory, striking a barely visible target and leaving no doubt of her capability. The base was silent, the only sound the distant impact. Then slowly, a ripple of awe spread across the observers. Heads nodded, whispers of recognition passed along. She had just reminded everyone present that mastery was more than training. It was instinct, experience, and focus executed flawlessly. Mercer finally allowed himself a small smile. He had seen her in the weapons bay and had respected her precision, but seeing her live, with stakes tangible and outcomes undeniable, changed everything. She was not merely skilled, she was legendary. The murmurs of the 3,247-meter shot suddenly made sense. They were not exaggerations or gossip. She was capable of feats that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Operators approached her after the demonstration, some seeking advice, others simply to witness her technique up close. She guided them quietly, correcting subtle stances, demonstrating breathing control, and offering insight without preaching. She didn't need the attention. She gave knowledge freely but measured, teaching through demonstration rather than words. Mercer noted how respect followed her effortlessly, not demanded, not boasted about, simply earned. Finally, the commander approached one last time before the demonstration ended. "You've changed what I thought was possible," he said honestly. "That was extraordinary." She nodded, packing the rifle carefully. "It's just a rifle and a target, sir. Everything else is preparation." Mercer realized that her humility and understated confidence were as powerful as her marksmanship. The combination made her not just a record-setting sniper, but a leader in her own right, someone whose influence would ripple quietly but profoundly through those around her. As he watched her leave the range, Mercer felt a mixture of awe and anticipation. He now understood why whispers had circled the base, why her file was so heavily redacted, and why she had remained invisible despite achievements that could have made her a household name within elite circles. Her skill was undeniable, her record real, and her composure unwavering. And yet, she remained quiet, focused, and humble, an enigma whose true reach was only beginning to be understood. That day, the base had gone silent, not in fear, but in respect. Operators and commanders alike had witnessed not just marksmanship, but the embodiment of discipline, precision, and mastery at the highest level. Mercer knew one thing with certainty. This was a soldier whose story deserved to be told, whose capabilities would influence missions far beyond what anyone present could imagine. As he walked away from the range, the echoes of her shots lingered in his mind, a reminder that extraordinary skill could exist quietly, invisibly, and still leave a mark on everyone who witnessed it. The base was quieter than usual that evening, a rare lull between operations. Commander Daniel Mercer had requested a private meeting with Specialist Morgan, a chance to speak without the distractions of training drills, onlookers, or hushed whispers. He paced briefly outside the small briefing room, mind racing. Today, he intended to uncover the story behind the shot he had only heard of in fragments, the legendary 3,247-meter sniper record that seemed almost mythical. When the door opened, she entered calmly, carrying only her personal notebook and a sense of quiet authority. She acknowledged him with a slight nod, no fanfare, no hint of ceremony. Mercer motioned for her to sit, and they both took their places across from one another. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. It was a pause filled with unspoken respect. "You know why I asked to meet you," Mercer began, his tone measured. "I've seen your skill firsthand, today at the range, and the rumors about that shot, you've already heard them, I'm sure." She nodded slightly, her eyes calm, focused, yet unreadable. "I have," she said simply, "and I know you've seen the file. That's all the confirmation anyone really needs, isn't it?" Mercer leaned forward. "Confirmation, yes, but I want the story, the context. Most of what's written, or rather blacked out, doesn't tell the full picture. It doesn't explain the circumstances, the challenges, or what it truly meant. I want to understand what that shot required from you mentally, physically, operationally." She considered him for a moment, weighing her words. "That shot, it wasn't about record-breaking. It was about necessity. Our team was pinned on the ridgeline, enemy observation post, spotting every movement. Any miscalculation could have cost lives. The distance, 3,247 meters, was dictated by terrain and opportunity, not ego or accolades. It was one chance, one round, one outcome." Mercer listened intently, absorbing every detail. He had witnessed her skill, her calm under pressure, but hearing it described in context made the magnitude of her achievement tangible. "One shot?" he asked. "That's all it took?" She nodded. "One shot. One calculated, precise shot. Wind, elevation, humidity, angle, rotation of the Earth, every factor had to be accounted for. One error and the mission fails. One error and lives are lost. I had trained for moments like that, yes, but training is never the same as the real thing. You never truly know until it happens." Mercer exhaled slowly. He had trained with elite marksmen, but the stakes she described, precision at impossible distances in operational conditions, were beyond what he had ever witnessed. "How did you calculate the trajectory?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Did you have specialized equipment?" She shook her head. "Equipment helps, but it's not everything. You observe, estimate, and trust your calculations. Sensors and ballistic computers provide data, but ultimately it's judgment honed by experience. I had seconds to assess, make the adjustments mentally, and commit. The rifle, the ammunition, the wind flags, everything had to be aligned perfectly. And I had to hold my breathing, my heartbeat, my focus, everything. Mercer felt the weight of her words settle over him. He could imagine the intensity of that moment, the quiet calculation, the nerve, the discipline required to execute a shot at the very edge of human capability. This wasn't just skill. It was mastery refined through countless missions, countless hours, and extreme pressure. "Tell me about the shot itself," he urged gently. "What was the moment like when you fired?" She closed her eyes briefly as if recalling the scene vividly. "Time slows," she said. "You become aware of everything. Distance stretches, wind patterns whisper in subtle movements, the target shifts imperceptibly, and your body, you have to control every muscle. The trigger pulls smoothly, the recoil is absorbed, the round sails. You don't watch it fly, you trust it. And when it hits, you exhale because you know you've done everything you could. Lives are saved. That's the only measure that matters." Mercer nodded slowly, his mind replaying the events in his imagination. He had seen extraordinary shooters, but she had described a moment that bordered on the impossible, calculating physics, terrain, and human factors in real time at distances that defied most operational norms. This wasn't just a skill, it was an art form executed under lethal pressure. "And the reaction?" Mercer asked quietly, after the shot. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "We moved. The mission continued. Lives were preserved. There was no celebration. There was no time. Only focus, only preparation for the next action. The record, it wasn't recorded publicly. Only a few knew because that's all the operation allowed. The rest, whispers, speculation. That's the world I work in. Achievement is measured by survival, not recognition." Mercer leaned back, absorbing her words. He had never truly understood the weight of operational secrecy in such a visceral way. Here was someone who had achieved what most would call a miracle, hitting a target over 3 kilometers away under combat conditions. Yet she carried it with quiet humility. There were no medals pinned to her chest for this feat, no stories in the press, only the knowledge that she had made the impossible happen and saved lives in the process. "You make it sound almost serene," Mercer said, half in admiration, half in disbelief. "The precision, the calm, how do you carry that weight?" She shrugged lightly, though her eyes remained focused, steady. "Discipline, focus, experience, and understanding. I've seen what happens when operators lose control under pressure. Panic costs lives. Fear costs lives. Precision and calm, they preserve them. That's why I work this way. That's why I remain quiet. This is my role, my responsibility, not my performance." Mercer felt a profound respect settle over him. He had spent decades in combat, but rarely had he encountered someone whose mastery combined lethal precision with such quiet discipline. She was more than a soldier. She was a strategist, a guardian, an artist operating at the extreme edge of possibility. He studied her for a moment longer. "You've changed how I'll think about snipers forever," he admitted. "Not just the shot, not just the technique, the way you approach everything. Calm, calculated, disciplined. Humble, yet lethal. You're extraordinary." She met his gaze evenly. "Thank you, sir. I don't need recognition for what I do. I need it to work, that's all." Mercer nodded slowly. He had expected technical explanations, perhaps a story of tactics or skill. Instead, he had been given insight into her philosophy, her discipline, and the essence of her extraordinary ability. He realized that the 3,247-meter shot was not just a record. It was the culmination of training, mental fortitude, operational mastery, and a commitment to protect lives at all costs. For Mercer, the meeting crystallized everything he had observed in the weapons bay, the range, and the classified files. This woman was not merely a technician or an elite marksman. She was a living legend executing feats that most operators could only imagine, all while maintaining humility and focus. Her story, part whispered rumor, part hidden record, and now partially revealed through her words, was a testament to the quiet power of mastery in action. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, Mercer rose from his seat, a mixture of awe and respect settling over him. "I'm honored to have witnessed your skill firsthand," he said quietly, "and I'll make sure your contributions are understood even if they remain classified. You deserve recognition in the ways that matter." She nodded once, acknowledging him, then turned to leave, carrying herself with the same calm authority she had displayed throughout. Mercer watched her go, understanding that while the world might never fully know the story of the 3,247-meter shot, he now had a clear understanding of the magnitude of her achievement and the extraordinary person behind it. That night, as he reviewed the files and replayed their conversation in his mind, Mercer felt a profound shift in perspective. Mastery, humility, and precision, combined in a single operator, had redefined his understanding of what was possible. Specialist Morgan was not just a record holder. She was a force, a guardian, a silent legend whose story was only beginning to be appreciated by those privileged enough to witness it firsthand. Days passed after the private meeting, but Commander Daniel Mercer could not shake the impact of what he had learned. Specialist Morgan's 3,247-meter sniper shot had already redefined his understanding of precision, skill, and calm under pressure. Yet he sensed there was more, an unseen layer of mastery that could not be conveyed in files, whispers, or isolated demonstrations. Today, he would witness it. The operations center was alive with the faint hum of monitors and tactical chatter, a controlled chaos that belied the complexity of the mission simulations about to unfold. Mercer watched from the observation platform as operators prepared for the exercise, but all eyes were drawn to one figure, Morgan. Her posture remained calm, every movement measured, the epitome of readiness. She carried herself not as a participant, but as a commander in her own right, someone whose awareness extended beyond herself and into the environment around her. The simulation was designed to test not only marksmanship, but coordination, strategy, and split-second decision-making under unpredictable conditions. Targets were placed at varying elevations, distances, and obscured positions. Automated systems introduced environmental variables, wind shifts, moving cover, and simulated enemy countermeasures. Every scenario was a test of perception, judgment, and skill under pressure. As the exercise began, Mercer noticed how she observed the environment first, taking in every detail before acting. Most operators moved quickly, reacting instinctively, relying on training and muscle memory. Morgan, however, seemed to operate on another level. Her eyes tracked subtle cues, the sway of simulated foliage, the pattern of shadows, the drift of wind flags, and the movement of distant targets. She adjusted her stance and scope not after calculations, but in anticipation of them. It was predictive, almost preternatural. When the first signal came, Morgan executed flawlessly. Her round struck targets precisely, each shot accounting for environmental variables that others were still calculating. She moved seamlessly between positions, taking advantage of cover, timing, and trajectory to maintain an edge over the simulated adversary. It was no longer simply marksmanship. It was battlefield choreography, each movement a deliberate, lethal dance. Mercer noted the subtle way she communicated with her team. Without words, she coordinated positioning, firing order, and tactical adjustments. Hand gestures, eye contact, and body orientation conveyed instructions with clarity and efficiency. Even seasoned operators around her deferred to her judgment, responding almost instinctively to her silent guidance. Mercer realized he was witnessing a combination of sniper skill, leadership, and operational genius. The simulation intensified. Targets moved unpredictably, obstacles changed, and simulated threats emerged from unexpected angles. Other operators scrambled to adapt, some missing shots, others hesitating under the pressure. Morgan, however, remained focused, fluid, and precise. Each decision flowed naturally, every action executed with confidence and speed. She was in perfect harmony with her environment and her team, anticipating threats before they fully materialized. Mercer's attention was drawn to her rapid problem-solving. A simulated sniper threat appeared in an elevated position, attempting to counter her team's advancement. Without hesitation, she recalculated trajectory and movement, aligning her shots to neutralize the threat before it could compromise her unit. The precision, timing, and decision-making were awe-inspiring. More than skill, it was mastery of the battlefield itself. Between shots, she adjusted equipment, confirmed environmental data, and communicated corrections to her teammates, all without breaking focus. Mercer realized this was not a one-trick operator. Her expertise extended far beyond shooting. She understood terrain, timing, human behavior, and physics in a way that allowed her to manipulate outcomes with near-perfect efficiency. The simulation wasn't just a test of marksmanship. It was a demonstration of strategic brilliance executed at the edge of human capability. As the exercise progressed, Mercer observed her guiding less experienced operators through complex scenarios. She corrected stances, suggested angles, and predicted environmental effects, teaching not by lecture but through demonstration. Each adjustment was subtle, precise, and tailored to the operator's ability. The team's performance improved visibly under her guidance, responding faster, aiming more accurately, and navigating the simulated battlefield with efficiency they had never demonstrated before. Mercer felt a profound respect settle over him. He had seen extraordinary soldiers, elite snipers, and tactical geniuses, but rarely had he witnessed someone who could combine all three seamlessly. Morgan's 3,247-meter shot was astonishing, but this orchestration of skill, strategy, and mentorship revealed the full extent of her extraordinary ability. She was not merely a sniper. She was a battlefield force multiplier, a living embodiment of discipline, intelligence, and precision. The final phase of the simulation pushed her to the limits. A simulated hostage scenario required careful coordination, environmental assessment, and rapid engagement. Morgan moved swiftly between positions, neutralizing threats, guiding her team, and maintaining complete situational awareness. Every shot, every decision, every movement was executed with near-perfect timing. When the exercise concluded, she stood calmly, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, yet the impact of her actions was undeniable. Mercer descended to the range floor to speak with her privately. "I've watched many operators, many snipers, and many tactical experts," he said quietly. "But I've never seen someone perform at this level, combining marksmanship, strategy, and leadership so seamlessly. Today, you've redefined my understanding of operational mastery." She nodded, calm and unassuming. "I don't aim to redefine anything, sir. I aim to achieve results. Lives are protected, missions succeed, that's the measure." Mercer shook his head, a small smile breaking through. "That may be your measure, but what I've seen today, what you did at the 3,247-meter range, and here it's beyond measure. You are extraordinary, humble, disciplined, and lethal. And the way you guide others quietly, it's brilliance in motion." She allowed a faint smile. "I've learned from many, sir. Every experience, every mission, every challenge shapes skill. What you saw today is the sum of that experience. Nothing more, nothing less." Mercer reflected on the journey he had witnessed. The weapons bay, the whispered rumors, the classified file, the live fire demonstration, the story behind the record shot, and now this simulation. Each phase had revealed layers of skill, discipline, and mastery that were rare even among elite operators. Specialist Morgan was more than a record holder. She was an extraordinary force capable of influencing outcomes, mentoring others, and redefining operational standards, yet all done with quiet humility. As the team gathered after the simulation, operators moved with renewed confidence, having learned from someone whose abilities were legendary yet understated. Mercer watched them, understanding the ripple effect of Morgan's presence. Her skill did not just achieve results, it inspired, educated, and elevated everyone around her. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the base, Mercer walked alongside her briefly, observing the way she moved, still calm, still precise, still focused. He knew he had witnessed something rare, a living legend, a soldier whose expertise transcended rifles, distances, and records, extending into strategy, mentorship, and operational mastery. "Your story, it's not just about that record shot," Mercer said softly. "It's everything you do, everything you embody, and it changes how I see what's possible." She glanced at him, serene and measured. "Then you understand. That's all that matters. Achievements are only meaningful if they impact outcomes, save lives, and improve others. Recognition is secondary. Focus is everything." Mercer nodded slowly. The lesson was clear. True mastery was quiet, measured, and profoundly effective. Specialist Morgan's influence would extend far beyond what anyone could measure or record. And for him, witnessing it firsthand had reshaped his understanding of skill, leadership, and the extraordinary potential of one dedicated individual. The base had settled into an uneasy calm after the intense simulations and live-fire exercises. Commander Daniel Mercer stood on the observation deck, looking out over the sprawling training grounds. The sun was low, painting the horizon in shades of orange and crimson. For the past several days, he had watched, analyzed, and learned more than he had in years of service. Specialist Morgan's presence, her skill, her quiet authority, it had all left an indelible impression. Mercer thought back to the first day he had noticed her in the weapons bay. She had been methodically cleaning her Barrett.50, her movements precise, deliberate, almost meditative. He had assumed she was merely proficient, perhaps highly skilled in maintenance. Yet in the days that followed, through whispers, classified files, live-fire demonstrations, and private conversations, he had come to understand the reality. She was extraordinary. A sniper, a strategist, a teacher, and a quiet force capable of shaping outcomes with near-perfect precision. Today, however, he wanted to acknowledge her contributions in a way that went beyond whispers and observation. He called her into his office, a rare act given her preference for operating quietly and without recognition. She entered calmly, carrying herself with the same measured authority he had observed in every interaction. Mercer gestured for her to sit. "I've seen what you can do," he began, voice steady but filled with respect. "From the 3,247-meter shot to today's simulations, you've shown skill, discipline, and leadership that's unmatched in my experience. But I want to make something clear. Your story doesn't need medals or public acknowledgement. The impact of your work speaks louder than any award ever could." She regarded him silently for a moment, her eyes calm, unwavering. "I don't serve for recognition, sir. I serve to ensure success, to protect lives, and to complete the mission. That is enough." Mercer nodded, understanding fully. "And yet, I think it's important for you to know the effect you've had on those around you. The operators who have observed you, learned from you, and trained alongside you, they are better because of your example. Your story may be quiet, but its influence is profound. You've redefined what they, and I, believe is possible." She allowed herself the faintest of smiles. "Then the mission continues in other ways, even if I remain unseen. That is enough for me." Mercer reflected on the past days, the whispered rumors of her record, the classified file he had accessed, the live-fire demonstration, and the complex simulations that showcased her tactical brilliance. Each layer revealed not just her skill but her character, humility, focus, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to precision. She was a legend in action, yet her legacy was silent, hidden in shadows that few could penetrate. Later, Mercer walked alongside her across the base grounds as the last light faded. He noticed how other operators gave her space, instinctively respecting her authority and skill without needing explicit instruction. He realized that she had already left a mark on the culture of the unit, quietly shaping it through example, mentorship, and unparalleled competence. "You've inspired more than you know," he said quietly. "Not just through skill, but through how you carry yourself. Humility paired with mastery, it's rare, almost unheard of, and yet you do it effortlessly." She nodded, eyes forward, her gaze steady. I lead by example. Actions matter more than words. Influence is earned, not declared. The measure of success is outcomes, not applause." Mercer smiled, realizing that this philosophy extended beyond the battlefield. Specialist Morgan's approach to skill, leadership, and mastery offered lessons applicable to any arena where precision, calm, and discipline were essential. She was more than a soldier. She was a model of excellence that transcended context, a living standard for what humans could achieve under pressure, with focus, and with integrity. As night fell, the base lights illuminated the training grounds, casting long shadows over the landscape where she had demonstrated feats of precision that would become legendary within elite circles. Mercer knew that, while the broader world might never hear of her 3,247-meter sniper shot or her flawless tactical demonstrations, those who had witnessed her, learned from her, and served alongside her would carry the memory of her skill forward. In the following weeks, Mercer found himself sharing lessons learned from observing her, not details of classified missions, of course, but insights into discipline, focus, and leadership. Her approach to mastering skill through preparation, calm under pressure, and quiet confidence became a benchmark for others, a model that operators would strive to emulate without ever fully knowing the extent of her legendary accomplishments. Specialist Morgan continued her duties with the same quiet dedication she had always shown. She trained, guided, and executed missions with precision, never seeking recognition. Yet her influence permeated the base. Operators moved more deliberately, leaders made decisions with greater consideration, and the ethos of precision and humility she embodied became woven into the fabric of the unit. Mercer often found himself reflecting on the journey that had begun with a simple observation in the weapons bay. What had started as curiosity had evolved into profound respect and understanding. He had witnessed firsthand the capabilities of a soldier who could redefine operational limits, and he had learned lessons about leadership, discipline, and the power of quiet mastery that would stay with him for the rest of his career. The story of Specialist Morgan, her record-breaking sniper shot, and her tactical brilliance would remain largely untold outside classified circles. Yet within the walls of the unit, her legacy was unmistakable. She had shown that true excellence is not measured by recognition or accolades, but by the lives preserved, the missions completed, and the influence quietly exerted on those around her. One evening, as Mercer observed her overseeing a team exercise, he realized the full impact of her presence. The way she moved, the decisions she made, the calm authority she radiated, all of it served as a lesson for the operators who followed her lead. She was, in every sense, a living example of mastery in action, lethal, precise, disciplined, and humble. He approached her quietly after the exercise. "I've seen countless operators, many with skill that would impress any commander," he said. "But none have had the combination of precision, discipline, and humility that you exhibit. You are extraordinary, and your story, even if untold publicly, will shape those who serve here for years to come." She gave a small, acknowledging nod. "Then my work continues in the right direction," she said. "That is enough." Mercer smiled, understanding fully. The greatest legacy is not always the one broadcast to the world. Sometimes it is the silent, steady influence of excellence, demonstrated consistently, quietly, and without the need for applause. Specialist Morgan had achieved that. She had shown the impossible, the world record sniper shot, tactical brilliance in complex simulations, and leadership that inspired without words. And she had done it all with a humility and discipline that elevated everyone around her. As the night settled over the base, Mercer stood watching her silhouette against the dim lights, a figure of calm authority in a world where excellence often went unrecognized. He knew that her story, though mostly hidden, would resonate quietly, profoundly, and permanently within those who had witnessed it. She had redefined the standards of mastery, and her legacy, silent, lethal, and precise, would endure far beyond the battlefield. In the end, it was clear. Specialist Morgan was not just a sniper, not just a soldier, not just a legend whispered about in corridors. She was the embodiment of what it meant to combine skill, discipline, and humility. And for those fortunate enough to witness it, the story was unforgettable.